And now I would like to introduce Elizabeth Vanderstoop. Elizabeth is an elder in our storytelling community. She tells of her life in the Netherlands and also of her immigration to Calgary with her young family way back in the last century in 1968. She delights us with those stories. And Elizabeth and Neil, her partner, have been our StoryShare poster children. They've taken part in every part of our project, from back when we were doing telephone calls to online Zoom meetings and tell-arounds in person at their residence. And then, of course, the videos that she has recorded. Now tonight, you're in for a real interesting story. Elizabeth will tell us a story from World War II of her own family, and it is called My Sister and I. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much, Mary, for the introduction. And so the title of my story, as Mary told us already, is My Sister and I. I grew up in Holland during the Second World War with my parents and my 5 siblings. During that time, there was a big divide between the northwestern part of the Netherlands and of Holland, where we lived. In Holland, it was completely closed off for food brought in, coal for cooking or heating. It was terrible. It was real war. People were suffering from cold and hunger, and there was just nothing that could be done about it. The Germans were in full control of that area, and the winter at that time was just brutal. So people tried to survive, but still 20,000 people died from cold and starvation. That is why that time is called in the history books the Hunger Winter, and it was a hunger winter. One morning, waking up in a very cold house, my mom took my older sister and myself aside and said, "We will not survive the winter this way. We have to do something." She said, we bought this little stove, and it burns wood, and I need that to cook the little bit of food that we can still get. And also, we need one warm room in the house. She went on, "I've heard of a city that was completely bombed out by the Germans, destroyed, abandoned. But people go there now and they find wood, lots of wood between the bricks and the wires." So I was wondering, would you like to go there together and see what you can find? I was 11 years old and my sister was 13, and we looked at each other and we said, like out of one mouth, we said, "Yeah, I can do that." We realized that to survive the winter, we had to do something together. And so it went. My opa, who lived with us at that time and was very handy, he built a box on top of the bottom part of the pram, so we would have something to put our wood in. And so it went. We went the first day after learning how to get to that city and started our trek. We were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen. And we had to walk an hour and a half to get to that city. But when we arrived, we did see the destruction. This was a harbor city, so it was fiercely defended by the Germans. But we also saw all the wood that was on the ground. It was just really a rich area in that way. So my sister said, you know what? Maybe we should start with putting 4 long pieces. I'm sure we can find those in each of the corners of the box. Then we will fill the box with smaller pieces. I said, yeah, and then over top, we can put longer pieces, again, supported by the 4 corner sticks. Well, we looked at each other in surprise, like that we found so quickly such a good plan. And we were sure it would work. So we went in one of the places that looked like a family had lived there. It felt really weird and kind of sad. But then we looked around and saw lots of pieces of wood that we could throw in the cart. So that's what we started to do. Walking over the rubble was very difficult, but when we started to really gather a good amount of wood, that gave us energy. After a couple of hours, we felt hungry, and my mom had made a couple of slices of the black bread that we ate at that time. But she put a spread on it. Tasted remarkably like cheese. I don't know how she did that, how she made that spread, but it sure tasted delicious after all that hard work. So we rested a bit, went back to our job. When it started to become really dusky, we decided that it was time to go home. We came home, and my mom, we clapped our hands together and was so happy. Oh, she thanked us for our hard work, and she filled the stove that was standing at the hearth with the wood that we had brought in and put a flame to it. And very soon, the crackling of the wood and the warmth that started to fill the room made us look at each other with a smile and with pride. The next morning, the stove was cold and the wood was gone. So we realized that we would have to go out every day to keep our family alive. Well, the thought wasn't all that bad, because coming home with a load of wood that profited our whole family gave us enough satisfaction to go out the next day with an empty cart and full of anticipation for the job ahead. And so it went that winter. And winter it was incredibly cold. It was the coldest winter in memory. Also much more snow. We didn't have the shoes to keep our feet warm. Neither did we have boots. And our clothing was not really adequate either. In the end, we only had one pair of mitts that we shared. The other pair had been shredded by the wood that we were picking up constantly. It became harder and harder, of course, to stay warm. One day, we were so cold that we kept on stamping our feet, putting our hands in our armpits to try to keep a little bit of warmth inside. Because of that, it took us a lot longer to fill our cart. And we wanted to come home with a good load. So we looked around, and it was starting to get dark. And we didn't say much, but we said, just, well, let's go. We were also thinking about the curfew. At 8 o'clock, everyone had to be off the street. That got us hurrying. At the entrance to the city was a boom that we always had to had to pass when we arrived there and when we left. And then one of the 2 German soldiers would keep guard there. There was a guard booth on the side of the road where one of them stood to shelter from the cold and the snow. And then the other one would lift the boom and let us through. So this time we were on our way to the boom, and we were trying to hurry because we wanted to get home. But when we got to the boom, one of the German soldiers stood there, didn't lift the boom. He said, it was a really loud voice, "Halt!" It scared me so much that my heart started to pound. And the officer started to point. Didn't see that till then, but there was a pile of wood already on the side of the road. And he pointed at that. Then at our cart, then again at the pile of wood on the side of the road. Now that message was clear. He wanted us to empty our cart on that pile. I started to sob. The thought that we would go home with an empty cart and the disappointed faces of my mom and my siblings, I could not even think about it. So the officer became angry, impatient. So more forcefully, he pointed again at that wood, at our cart and at the wood. I started to cry harder. And my sister put her arm around my shoulders. And we both stood there and shook our heads like this. There was no way, that's what it meant, that we would get rid of the wood that we had worked so hard to get, and that we would need to give up now, while we needed it at home so badly. So we just stood there. Then a man came. The officer was distracted. The man came also with a cart full of wood, and the officer walked over to him and did the same thing, made the same gestures. And the man just emptied his cart and went his way. And then more people came. Of course, it was that time of day. So the officer was building, but every time I heard that loud voice, "Halt!" I felt stronger. I became more defiant. In my head, I said, no way, we're going to give this up. So we were just standing there like frozen to the ground. And the pile of wood grew and grew. Then a stir. The sound of a motorbike coming toward us. Stopped at the guard booth, and two German officers came off. After much saluting and clacking of German boots, they started to talk and look around, and then one of the arriving officers pointed at us and seemed to ask a question. The officer who had told us to empty our cart just said something and shrugged his shoulders in an impatient manner. Then the unbelievable happened. The other officer came toward us. He really looked at us. And then he made a move with his arm like, "Go." He was telling us to go. He let us go. And we went. But the feeling in my back seemed to tell me that 4 guns were pointed at us, ready to shoot. I don't remember anything of that walk home. It seemed like someone had taken over from us. To this day, I'm oblivious to that 1.5 hours of my life. But coming home, our homecoming was jubilant. My mom hugged us and said, she took a few pieces of the wood in our cart, put it in the stove, and said, "We will use this sparingly. You can tomorrow stay home and rest." But after that, we went out every day to get a load of wood until May 1941, when we were liberated by the Canadians. But that's a whole other story. Thank you.